freedoms for now? I thought you liked Trump. What is going on here? But I mean, political freedoms, economic stability, economic opportunity. Wow, I think this is a great country. I mean, I think like fireworks. They should have fireworks to celebrate this country.
It's just getting better.
Yeah, I think we're on our way. I think so.
Well, Juan thinks it's a great country. I want everybody to know this was July 4th, 2018. Juan said it. We're going to hold you to that now, Juan.
You can hold to me any day of the year.
All right, good.
I actually think it is a great country.
All right.
Although I think there's some people who are up to sneaky business. I don't know.
Like Strzok and Page.
Oh, my gosh. You know, we never stop with the fireworks. That's it for this special edition of The Five. You know, we hope all of you have a wonderful Independence Day. We're going to see you back here tomorrow. Don't miss it. And guess what? Special report up next.
This Independence Day, President Trump promises to make America great again with his pick for the Supreme Court. Congressman Jim Jordan answers reporters' questions about whether he knew about sexual abuse claims against a teen doctor at The Ohio State University. And we're checking in on your health care with a look at how the Trump administration is working to change Obamacare. This is Special Report. Happy 4th of July and welcome to Washington. I'm John Scott in for Bret Baier tonight. On this day that we celebrate our freedom, many are concerned about how President Trump's pick to sit on the Supreme Court will affect theirs. President Trump isn't talking about it today, instead celebrating Independence Day with military families at the White House. That's where we also find correspondent Rich Edson. Good evening, Rich.
Good evening, John. And hamburgers, hot dogs, and the Marine Corps band. The president just kicked off military families picnic here on the South Lawn of the White House. The president honoring each branch of service here on the South Lawn. And this is all ahead of tonight's fireworks show over the nation's capital. 242 years of independence, and the 45th president commemorates the first.
General George Washington and his army of brave patriots fought a long, tough war with the British to win America's freedom. Today, as we celebrate the 4th of July with friends and family, let us never forget that our freedom has been earned through the blood and sweat and sacrifice of American heroes.
President Trump began celebrations last evening, speaking at a salute to service dinner in West Virginia, after a day of interviewing finalists to replace retiring Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy, his second high court selection.
We hit a home run there, and we're going to hit a home run here. And step by step, we are making America great again.
Administration officials say the president has, over the past few days, interviewed 7 candidates. He says he'll announce his decision Monday.
The people, united, will never be defeated.
Liberal groups are already planning opposition to the yet selected nominee, calling for protests at senators' offices, warning a Trump appointee would mean major changes to laws governing health care and abortion. The White House says the president is evaluating candidates' overall judicial philosophy. Officials are already devising their strategy to navigate the president's nominee, whoever it is, through a narrowly divided U.S. Senate. Shortly after the president's announcement, leaders from countries in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization meet in Brussels. The president continues criticizing countries that spend less than the NATO target of 2% of their economies on defense. That's the majority of NATO members. And one major European power is now promising to spend more.
Compared to what others do in relation to their gross domestic product, it is not sufficient what we spend, and that's why we have committed ourselves to increase our defense budget to up to 1.5% of our gross domestic product by 2025.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will meet up in Brussels with President Trump. First, the secretary travels to Pyongyang, his third known trip to the North Korean capital. Officials stress there are still significant negotiations ahead with North Korea on how it would dismantle its nuclear program, how the U.S. would verify that, and what North Korea would receive in return. There are concerns North Korea will continue a secret program. And this Kim Jong-un charm offensive is a ploy to get the U.S. to withdraw from the Korean Peninsula. The State Department says the administration understands the risks in dealing with North Korea. After the NATO summit, President Trump is scheduled to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The United States and Russia are at odds over several issues, including a violation of the ceasefire in southwest Syria by Russia, Russia's continued backing of the Assad regime, and its seizure of Crimea a few years ago. John?
Rich Edson at the White House tonight. Rich, thank you. An icon of freedom became the site of a bit of a tug of war today with New York police as a woman climbed up the base of the Statue of Liberty and onto the statue itself. The woman sat at the bottom of the statue's robe and remains there at this hour. Her climb came shortly after the arrests of several people who hung a banner calling for abolishing immigrations and customs enforcement from the statue's pedestal. It's not clear if she is a part of that group. Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan went on the record and on camera today to once again deny claims that he knew about student allegations of sexual abuse by their wrestling team doctor at The Ohio State University. Jordan was once an assistant wrestling coach there. Correspondent Ellison Barber joins us with what both sides are saying. Good evening, Ellison.
Good evening, John. 3 former wrestlers at Ohio State University told NBC News Republican Congressman Jim Jordan either knew about sexual abuse involving the team doctor or he chose to ignore what was common knowledge. The congressman tonight adamantly denying it.
I know Jim knew about what I call the deviant sexual atmosphere that we were exposed to.
How do you know?
Well, we all had conversations. There was a lot of banter about, Doc being a groper.
I mean, Mike Russell for us was, was a friend, but something's changed. It's, things he said are just not true. We knew of no abuse, never heard of abuse. If we had, we'd have reported it.
On Capitol Hill, Representative Jim Jordan is arguably one of the most recognizable members of the House GOP. He serves on the powerful Government and Oversight Committee, a co-founder of the House Freedom Caucus, and now he's being accused of ignoring sexual abuse. Jordan worked at Ohio State University as an assistant wrestling coach more than 20 years ago. In April, Ohio State announced that they were investigating allegations of sexual misconduct involving the wrestling team's former physician, Dr. Richard Strauss. University officials said the alleged incidents involved Strauss's behavior with student athletes from the mid-1970s through the late 1990s. Strauss died in 2005. One of the individuals named in the NBC report was previously involved in a lawsuit with the university. Another spent time in jail for fraud-related charges. One of those men, Dunyasha Yetz, told NBC this, quote, "I am not a perfect person, but ask any of the wrestlers and they will tell you. Everybody knew about Doc." Yetz told NBC News he once went to see Dr. Strauss for a thumb injury, and the doctor tried to pull his pants down. Yetz says he ran out, and one person he told about the incident was Jim Jordan.
I never knew of any abuse from Dr. Strauss, plain and simple.
A source close to this situation told Fox News that Congressman Jordan received a number of emails from one of his accusers, Mike DeSabato, and that the emails are being referred to Capitol Police. We've reached out to Mr. DeSabato and Mr. Yetz. So far, we have not heard back. We also invited Congressman Jim Jordan to speak with us on camera or on the phone. John?
Ellison Barber tonight. Ellison, thank you. The race to rescue 12 boys and their soccer coach from a cave in Thailand continues at this hour as authorities try to determine the best way to get them out. Correspondent Lisa Holland from our sister network Sky News is on the ground in Thailand to look at the risky rescue.
Thailand's Buddhist gods are being asked to deliver a miracle. This jungle province's most revered spiritual leaders came to the caves with relatives of the missing boys, willing their safe return. The monks and their followers truly believe in the power of prayer. Politicians, military leaders, religious leaders are coming and going from here all the time. It's absolutely chaotic, but they're powerless to provide any kind of guarantees about how and when the boys will be rescued. Thai Navy SEALs filmed this video of the boys introducing themselves, professing to be in good health, but not strong enough to take on the ultimate challenge. Divers are working round-the-clock shifts to supply the boys with food and medicine, but it's becoming clear training them to dive to safety may not be the best option. It's a perilous mission which rescuers don't yet dare risk.
You try and go swimming in mud that's almost as thick as this and see how you feel, and you know how to swim. They don't. So it's going to be a scary experience, but we do believe that they're strong enough to actually deal with it if that becomes the option that the Navy SEALs actually decide to do. Right now, we still don't know.
On the ground, the Thai military yet again rehearsed their drills for carrying out casualties. The elation of finding the group sheltering deep in the caves has been overtaken by the complexity of freeing them. The football team, known as the Wild Boars, must dig deep and display the characteristics of their namesakes, hardy creatures known for their ability to survive in the jungle. Lisa Holland, Sky News at the Tham Luang Caves in northern Thailand.
While the President and First Lady get ready to enjoy the 4th from the White House, thousands of others here in our nation's capital are having their own Independence Day celebrations along the National Mall. Correspondent Doug McElway is live there with a look at how visitors are honoring our independence. Doug, good evening.
Good evening, John. And ever since 9/11, 4th of July access on the National Mall has been greatly controlled. There are only 8 access points. Authorities check all of your personal belongings quite thoroughly. The list of prohibited items is lengthy, ranging from weapons to glass containers to fireworks to alcohol. That said, most of the emergency calls we are seeing today are heat-related, and things are progressing quite well. It is one of the few massive gatherings on the National Mall that is without controversy, where divisions are replaced by a common love of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Well, the reason this 4th of July is special to me is because I'm hoping that it'll help bring our country together a little.
If anyone was intent on causing trouble, it was Mother Nature. She threw a soggy heat index of 101 degrees on the crowd, restoring to the nation's capital the traditional meaning of the swamp. Not too bad for locals, but stifling for visiting Norwegians.
No, not too much, no.
Their discomfort mitigated by this unexpected rendezvous with a favorite news channel.
And by the way, we enjoy Fox News. This is the only American news channel we ever listen to.
And checks in the mail for me, right? They are among hundreds of thousands expected, not just for the fireworks, but for the parade, the concert, and the Smithsonian Folklife Festival, all on the National Mall. After 50 years of experience, the National Park Service has got this drilled down, erecting 18,000 feet of chain link fence, 14,000 feet of bike racks, 350 portable johns, 6 medical stations, and most importantly, 6,500 pyrotechnic shells to be launched at precisely 9:09 p.m. Also watching tonight from the White House South Lawn, President Trump, the First Lady, and invited military families, the people whose sacrifices make it all possible. And at 10 p.m. tonight, cleanup crews will descend on the mall. They'll work all night long, and by this time tomorrow, there will be scant evidence that anything out of the ordinary happened on the National Mall 24 hours earlier. John, back to you.
Doug McElway. Doug, thanks. So the folks on the mall know about discomfort, but a man who knows a lot about survival, Marine Major Eric Burkett. His Osprey aircraft crashed in North Africa in 2012, but Major Burkett lived. His recovery hasn't been easy. Tonight, national security correspondent Jennifer Griffin reports one foundation is helping to make it a little smoother.
On April 11, 2012, 2 weeks into his 6th combat deployment, Major Eric Burkett's V-22 Osprey tilt-rotor aircraft crashed in North Africa. He was one of only 2 Marines to survive.
That is actually off of one of the prop rotors from the V-22 that crashed.
After years of recovery, countless operations, and the amputation of his 2nd leg this year, Major Burkett, his wife Melissa, and their 6 children were given a fully furnished, wheelchair-accessible, specially adapted smart home built for them by the Gary Sinise Foundation.
Wow.
The keys to the home come on an iPad, which allows Major Burkett to control spaces he previously could not reach, giving him his independence back. Donations from Home Depot, JCPenney, GE, Benjamin Moore, the Semper Fi Fund, among others, made it possible.
Pretty much overwhelmed.
The foundation, started by actor Gary Sinise, best known for his role as Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump, will provide its 50th smart home this August and is trying to build 10 to 12 homes per year for severely injured veterans and first responders.
The idea of being able to get up and move around the house freely.
Oh, how beautiful.
Without thinking about the logistics of, should I use a chair, should I use crutches, you know, all that's gone.
Fox News first told the Burkett story in 2014 while he and his family were recovering at Walter Reed. He and his wife were raising their 4 children at the time at the hospital. They have since had twins. A master archer, shortly after the crash, Burkett began competing as a Paralympian.
I hate shooting from a wheelchair. I'd rather stand. It does get painful at times.
Burkett competed at the Warrior and Invictus Games and has won numerous gold medals for archery. Now he has his own bow lab in his basement. On Flag Day last month, the Gary Sinise Foundation presented their new home.
I just want to say a quick thank you to everybody that came out, to everybody that participated in this project, that prayed for us, that was with us along the way. Really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
On this Independence Day, Major Eric Burkett and his family raised the flag outside their new home in central Pennsylvania, a story of resilience and the generosity of Americans who are giving back to those who have served this nation. In Washington, Jennifer Griffin, Fox News.
That's great to see. Up next, how the Trump administration is working to change Obamacare. But first, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 2 in San Francisco, where 2 men have accepted a plea bargain in an Oakland warehouse fire that killed 36 people in 2016. The deal means the 2 men charged in the case will not go on trial and will finish their jail time in about 3 years. Fox 13 in Seattle. Scientists searching the seafloor off Washington state think they have found remnants of a meteor that lit up the skies there in March. NASA's curator of cosmic dust says they found 2 small fragments about 2 millimeters each. The fragments will now undergo an examination to confirm they came from the meteor. And take a live look at Denver from Fox 31. The big story there tonight is a wildfire burning in southern Colorado that has destroyed more than 100 homes. The spring fire has burned through nearly 100,000 acres, making it the 3rd largest wildfire in Colorado history. It is just 5% contained. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. President Trump has said to just let Obamacare implode, but his administration is also chipping away at the system through different tactics. In tonight's Obamacare Checkup, correspondent Peter Ducey looks at what the administration is doing to change what it considers a failing system.
The motion is not agreed to.
No repeal and replace, no problem for President Trump as he continues dismantling Obamacare.
We've essentially gutted it anyway, and we now have really good stuff coming.
That means the president didn't listen to his predecessor, Barack Obama, quoted as telling donors recently, "I said to the incoming president, just change the name and claim that you made these wonderful changes, and I would be like, you go." The Trump administration has whittled away at the ACA by cutting the budget for advertising and the budget for programs that help consumers sign up for coverage, making it easier for consumers to buy short-term plans, and by signing the tax cut bill, which rolled back the individual mandate.
The individual mandate, how about that one? That's not a very good one. That's where you have the privilege of paying a fortune in order to not pay to have bad health care. Think of that. So in other words, you pay a lot of money not to have health care.
Additionally, Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar has been focusing resources on finding doctors scamming Medicare and Medicaid.
Every dollar we recover from a lawbreaker helps to provide health care to an American who needs it.
And slashing sky-high drug prices.
There has not been one discussion with the president in any circumstance where drug pricing and bringing down drug prices has not been the first and last thing that he has mentioned to me.
Democrats are talking health care too, warning that the next Supreme Court justice could back up GOP efforts to further undo Obamacare.
Will they support a justice who will put health insurance companies over patients, or put the federal government between a woman and her doctor?
Potential Democratic presidential candidates are talking about the Obamacare fight as one that could kill.
That if people are denied health care, people die.
So that's a taste of what could be coming in 2020. Democrats who want to be the 46th president with dire warnings and demands that the 45th president stop undermining health care legislation bearing the name of the 44th president. John?
Peter Ducey. Thanks, Peter. House Minority Whip Steny Hoyer is spending this July 4th holiday in the hospital. The Maryland Democrat admitted yesterday with pneumonia. His spokesperson says he is expected to make a full recovery. We continue to celebrate our freedom on this Independence Day, and we know that wouldn't be possible without the men and women of our military. Correspondent Anna Koyman has been honoring some of those in uniform today and joins us live with more from Norfolk, Virginia, home to a massive U.S. naval base. Anna, good evening.
Isn't it? Good evening to you, John, and happy Independence Day to all of you at home. We're just waiting on the fireworks to kick off. I'm Anna Koyman, your 2018 Proud American host, and I'm so honored to be that for you this year. Behind me, you see the USS Monterey. It's an active duty guided missile cruiser, and it is actually the very ship that launched 30 Tomahawk missiles into Syria after Assad used chemical weapons on his own people. I spoke with some of the 350 sailors on board. They tell me they're proud to be an American this Independence Day, proud to be part of world history, and proud to be part of the fight for human rights around the world. Let's take a look around the ship.
I'm proud to be an American because of the ideals that America stands for, the idea of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness.
The main reason why I'm proud to be American is because of the opportunity to grow just with the country and as a person.
So what made you decide to join the Navy and serve your country?
And I wanted to show my family that there's more than what we had, so I got out and showed them, you know, you can go out there and get that.
What do they think?
They're pretty proud of me right now.
What is it this Independence Day that makes you proud to be an American?
It's the opportunity to serve, to be quite honest. We live in a nation where you can do what you want, you can be who you want to be, you can have your own beliefs, and to make sure that that continues is an absolute honor.
And a big thank you to the U.S. Navy for hosting us this week, and also the entire community here in Norfolk, Virginia. Friends, make sure you send us your pictures. Use that hashtag ProudAmerican and your American flag glasses and your red, white, and blue, hanging out with your friends, watching fireworks, hanging out at the barbecues and at the beach. We want to see those pictures, and we want to be able to share them with you. John, back to you. Happy Independence Day.
Looks like fun. Happy Independence Day to you as well. Anna Koyman. Well, a new poll shows a big drop in the number of Americans who consider themselves extremely proud to be one. Just 47% of adults say they are extremely proud to be Americans. That's a record low in Gallup's 18-year history of asking. Only 1 in 10 people say they are only a little or not at all proud. 2003 was a record year for patriotism, with 70% of Americans saying they were proud. Up next, Bret Baier with a hero story. First, beyond our borders tonight, British police confirm that for the second time in 4 months, 2 people are in critical condition after being exposed to a military-grade nerve agent developed in the Soviet Union. They say tests confirm what many residents feared. A man and woman in their 40s had been poisoned with the same toxin that almost killed a former Russian spy and his daughter. It is still not clear if the 2 cases are connected. Several Republican lawmakers are asking Russia not to meddle in our midterm election in November if it wants to improve ties with the U.S. The senators were in Moscow as part of a congressional visit ahead of a planned summit between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. And a love of sports is once again bringing the Koreas together. Basketball players from the North and South began 2 days of friendly games in Pyongyang amid a diplomatic push to resolve the nuclear standoff there with North Korea. This comes as Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is traveling to North Korea for meetings over the future of its nuclear program. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back. A Fox News alert, take a live look at the base of the Statue of Liberty, where this woman continues her standoff with New York City police. We are not absolutely certain that she is part of an anti-ICE group that protested earlier at the Statue of Liberty. They hung a banner that said "Abolish ICE." It was soon after that that she climbed the base of the statue and up onto the statue itself. You can see there she is just underneath the statue's right foot. New York police are asking her to come down, not using a great deal of force at this moment. But the standoff goes on. Of course, it is illegal to climb onto the Statue of Liberty. They have evacuated Liberty Island, and that has ruined the holiday plans for a whole bunch of people who wanted to spend the day on that iconic gift from the nation of France. But the standoff goes on. We will let you know if and when it is resolved. On this July 4th, we celebrate those who won America's independence. One of those brave souls was a woman whom history refers to as Molly Pitcher, but that name is folklore. Tonight we learn about the real woman behind the legend and the search to find her. My colleague Bret Baier has her story.
Wounded warrior, prisoner of war, disabled veteran, and an inspiration to serve.
Jennifer Minus is talking about her hero, Margaret Corbin, one of the first women to fight in the American Revolution.
Margaret Corbin's life and actions are not just a story. They are not just folklore. She was a real woman who lived, fought, and was recognized by name in congressional acts and War Department correspondence up to 1790.
Corbin's heroic story started on November 16, 1776, when she took over her husband's cannon after he was killed during the Battle of Fort Washington in Upper Manhattan. From across the Hudson River, General George Washington watched as some 3,000 Americans battled 9,000 British and Hessian troops. It was a devastating loss for the Americans. Many were wounded, including Corbin, who was hit by a grape shot in her shoulder and breast, leaving her disabled for the rest of her life. On July 6, 1779, Corbin, nicknamed Captain Molly, was awarded a lifelong Army pension from the Continental Congress,
making her the first woman veteran of the United States.
Corbin died in 1800 and was buried in an unmarked grave. In 1926, the Daughters of the American Revolution pinpointed what the group believed was Corbin's grave, a few miles south of West Point. The disinterred remains were taken to West Point and buried underneath a monument depicting Corbin. But in 2016, a shocking discovery was made when a gravesite disturbance led to an archaeological study of those remains. A forensic exam proved it was not Corbin, but rather an unidentified man from the 19th century. Now, a hunt is on to find this American hero.
Margaret Corbin is a veteran of the United States. She deserves to have the burial that she earned with her military service in the Battle of Fort Washington.
Most would agree, especially Corbin's descendants.
I brought my copy of Margaret Corbin's, the story of Margaret Corbin. This is a trove of details.
Jonathan Corbin has spent his entire life tracing his 31 ancestors who fought in the American Revolution.
My father was the one who told us about Molly Corbin and would read the story to us, as he liked to do. I asked my teacher, how come Molly Corbin's not in this textbook where she should be? Because she was a real hero, and she didn't know the answer. And I hope that that changes, because we need to give fuller recognition to what women have done.
Corbin's monument was erected at West Point some 50 years before the first female cadets. For decades, she has served as a model of unflinching bravery and sacrifice for women in the U.S. military. And for Minus, a mother and a former West Point instructor, Corbin is a source of inspiration.
Sometimes, some mornings were not that great with two toddler children, and very difficult and worried about them, but thinking also about what I needed to do the rest of that day in order to lead and inspire cadets. And I would come out that door right there, and I would see Margaret Corbin's monument. And I would think, if she could do what she did after watching her husband die in front of her, I could do whatever I needed to do that day with no problem.
Bret Baier, Fox News.
In the interest of full disclosure, we should mention that the producer of that segment, Christina Corbin, is a distant relative of Margaret Corbin. Now this Fox News alert, and during the time that Margaret Corbin report was running, well, police nabbed their suspect. This is a woman who we believe is protesting immigration and customs enforcement. We don't absolutely know that for a fact, but it was earlier today that a banner protesting ICE, in fact it said abolish ICE, was unfurled on the base of the Statue of Liberty shortly after this woman climbed from the base up onto the statue itself. You see her there just underneath the statue's raised right heel. New York City police have been negotiating with her for quite some time, trying to get her to voluntarily come down. She did apparently not want to do so, and so they moved in with their ropes. They are in the process of arresting her now. This is a live look at what's going on. We don't know who she is. We don't know exactly what her cause might be. The statue is not a solid piece of anything, I might mention. That's a fairly thin copper skin that's oxidized to that green color, and it certainly could be damaged by this kind of behavior. That's why police are trying to be ginger here, but also why it is a very big affront to go climbing onto the Statue of Liberty. Again, we don't know who she is or exactly what she's protesting, but when we learn more about it, if we do so during the balance of this hour, we will take you back there live. So we are counting down the days and discussing the potential nominees for the next Supreme Court justice. That's next.
I've spent the last 3 days interviewing and thinking about Supreme Court justices. We're going to announce it on Monday. And I think you'll be very impressed. These are very talented people, brilliant people, and I think you're going to really love it, like Justice Gorsuch. We hit a home run there, and we're going to hit a home run here.
The president's looking at a list prepared by outside groups with the intention of changing the precedent of the court, particularly as it relates to women's right and the right of choice.
And we're not going to make a decision based on specific cases.
So we are 5 days away from learning the name of the person the president will choose to appoint to the Supreme Court. Can he get that person past the Senate? Let's bring in our panel. Charles Hurt is opinion editor for the Washington Times. We're going to call him Charlie. Charles Lane is opinion writer for the Washington Post, and Tom Rogan, commentary writer for the Washington Examiner. So the tension is building. Everybody in Washington seems to have a guess as to who might be appointed. Charlie, I want to play for you some sound from the campaign trail. This is the president when he was still a candidate about a month before the election. Listen to this.
I am pro-life, and I will be appointing pro-life judges. I would think that will go back to the individual states. If we put another 2 or perhaps 3 justices on, that's really what's going to be, that will happen. And that'll happen automatically, in my opinion, because I am putting pro-life justices on the court. I will say this, it will go back to the states, and the states will then make a determination.
So despite those promises, Charlie, from the campaign trail, Democrats and some Republicans like Susan Collins have warned him not to make an overtly pro-life choice. Isn't there some irony there?
Yeah, there certainly is. First thing, obviously, this is the parlor game that Washington loves the most. And I think that one of the things that Donald Trump doesn't get credit for, and he should get credit for, is the transparency of all of this. He loves to tease about this stuff, whether it's talking about when he's going to make the announcement or for that matter, submitting the list to begin with. But I also think that his ability to sort of simplify things, and I know that his opponents would say he oversimplifies things, but his ability to simplify things down to the basic argument that we've been having in Washington over the Supreme Court for the past 40 plus 50 years about whether the Constitution means what it says or whether it means something that isn't in the Constitution. He's going to win that argument, and he wins that argument by putting forth justices like Gorsuch, and I think whoever he picks on Monday, who believe that the Constitution is exactly what it says, that you can't add things to it without duly changing it. It's a fight that a guy like Donald Trump is uniquely qualified to fight and win, I think.
It is. I mean, you have to give it to him. That's what he campaigned on. He said he would appoint conservative judges, and so far he has followed with that promise, Charles.
Yes, I'm not sure I would credit the president with having an elaborate, thought-out view of the Constitution. He is somebody who once talked about a judge signing a bill when he meant the judge signing an opinion, but he has been counseled by people who do have a doctrine. Leonard Leo of the Federalist Society in particular has been in the thick of this, and he is going to produce somebody from a list of people who are thoroughly vetted by the conservative movement. For many, many years, conservatives have been stewing over the appointment of David Souter by President George H.W. Bush, who turned out to be pretty much of a liberal on the court, and they are bound and determined that no such thing would ever happen again. There's very little danger of another Souter being produced off this list, but what's fascinating is the way in which there's a conflict developing over whether it would be safe enough to go with someone like Bret Kavanaugh, who's a dyed-in-the-wool conservative on the D.C. circuit, but perhaps not conservative enough for the pro-life courses.
Along those lines, Tom, liberals say that Anthony Kennedy, although he was appointed by a conservative President Reagan, sort of occupied the court's middle ground. He was kind of the swing justice, and therefore the president owes the court a middle ground kind of pick. But where does it say that in the Constitution?
Well, it doesn't. And look, President Trump, in terms of the rancor he receives from the left now, I think is even less predisposed towards appointing a justice like that. I think we will see a conservative justice who reflects that sort of deep background investigation, as it were. But what I also think is that conservatives, pro-life conservatives in particular, shouldn't necessarily get their hopes up too much. I think Roe v. Wade will ultimately be overturned. You look at the balance of the court. Well, the jurisprudence there has long been regarded as sort of flimsy.
Even liberal jurists will say that there are huge problems.
But I don't think you will see from the Roberts Court this move to sort of allow states to, for example, where it matters, prevent Planned Parenthood for sort of coming in, taking women to other states. That's the kind of weedy detail, though, that this will spark.
Back with our panel in just a moment, and we'll talk about the state of the military on this Independence Day. But we want to also take you back to New York Harbor, where New York City police have successfully collared their suspect who climbed onto the Statue of Liberty after first climbing the base. You can see her there in the middle, being led by two officers. She is bound in some way, whether it's handcuffs or something like that, we don't know, maybe just a safety rope. But they're getting ready to place her on the ladder, and we hope escort her down safely. And at that point, we may find out what this is all about. Back with more special report in just a moment.
Other countries to step up. They have a commitment to meet the 2% threshold, and he wants to see them do at least that. And some countries could do that by tomorrow, and he's asking that they step up and be part of the solution, and so a little bit more burden sharing instead of putting all the pressure on the United States to carry the weight.
Compared to what others do in relation to their gross domestic product, it is not sufficient what we spend, and that's why we have committed ourselves to increase our defense budget up to 1.5% of our gross domestic product by 2025.
And we are back with our panel, Charlie Hurt, Charles Lane, and Tom Rogan. So Germany is struggling to get to 1.5% of its GDP when it comes to defense spending. Take a look at some of the other NATO members. The United States pumps 3.57% of its GDP into NATO. Greece, despite all of its financial problems, 2.36%. The UK at 2.12%. And Estonia, little Estonia, 2.08% of its GDP goes into NATO spending. Charles Lane, is it any wonder President Trump is upset?
I'm not sure those figures are how much of our GDP we spend on NATO as opposed to how much we spend on defense overall.
Right.
And of course, the United States has responsibilities in the Pacific and Latin America that the Europeans do not have. Nevertheless, this is a long-standing problem, and I think privately, and I've talked to them many times, the Germans will tell you that they want to spend more on defense. A big part of the problem is that they have a party in the governing coalition, the Social Democrats, who are very much opposed to that. Their problem in a way is their GDP is growing so fast that it's hard to spend more on defense fast enough to get to that 2% mark. The reason Greece is over 2% is that its GDP collapsed, so that just staying in place. Having said all that, this is one of those where so much depends on how the president makes this demand and or request. He is making it in the context of a whole lot of other disparaging remarks about Europe, the EU, and pro-Putin remarks, and I think that frightens the Europeans. It's not well calculated to actually get them to say yes, because it would be humiliating for them under those circumstances to say yes to an American president. So even though his demand is legitimate and in some ways they want to meet it, it's not very well designed to get approved.
But Charlie, he's not the first president to make these complaints. Barack Obama complained that other NATO states were not living up to their fair share.
Yeah, but certainly, obviously, Donald Trump has done an awful lot to make more noise about this. Last week, I guess, when he was in Fargo, he rather hilariously declared that the era of global freeloading is over. And I think he meant it in terms of not only this, but also in terms of illegal immigration and trade as well. And a lot of people like to criticize him for getting hung up on these numbers, this 3.57 and all these other percentage things. But, you know, and people, like, for example, he gets hung up about crowd size. This is a businessman for whom everything has to be measured. That's a very good thing. We're in a town in Washington where nothing is measured. People don't even know the difference between $1 billion and $1 trillion, and they think it's really funny that they don't know that it's the difference between the two, because it's not their money. It's the taxpayers' money. And so you have a guy like Donald Trump, and he sees these numbers, and they really get under his skin, and it makes him very mad, and he wants people, whether it's trade or the giving to NATO, and I think it's a very healthy thing.
So when the president heads to Europe, Tom, for these NATO meetings, what kind of a reception can he expect?
Well, he can accept a frosty reception from the Germans. I actually take the line that if you look, you know, having grown up in Europe, my dad was with the State Department. He always said there is, to a degree, it is true that you have to speak the language, but with the Germans, with Angela Merkel talking about only getting to 1.5% by 2024, that's quite ridiculous. And the real problem here is that in terms of the structured capabilities of NATO, which ultimately define its ability to resist a Russian incursion, the United States continues to provide the dominant display of force there. You see the British and the French actually boosting defense spending. The British are probably going to announce in the next couple of months that they're going to go to 3%. So there is this internal friction in Europe. But I think Merkel has a problem here, because really the defense hawks in Germany recognize their submarine fleet is mostly in dry dock the whole time because they don't have spare parts. Capability matters, and ultimately the credibility of NATO is far more dependent on what the Russians see in force posture than what they see in terms of Trump's sort of tweets and arguments.
The irony of this whole situation is that Germany increasingly is aware that it needs to stand on its own 2 feet in between a decreasingly friendly America under Trump and Russia on the other hand, yet they don't have the capability. They lack any serious measure of hard power to defend themselves. And so I think the profound irony here is that it's very much in Germany's own self-interest to build up its defense capability. And internally, the politics just keep getting in the way every time.
The big dangle there very quickly is that Trump could offer to move the bases to Poland, which is actually above 2% as well. And that's closer to Russia.
He has been auditing the American troop presence lately in Germany very ostentatiously.
Well, of course, NATO was formed as a result of the Soviet threat. President Trump is going to be meeting with the inheritor of the Soviet legacy, Vladimir Putin of Russia. How's that going to go?
Well, you know, Donald Trump is not afraid to sort of negotiate with anybody, and he's going to do it very openly, and he's going to be, you know, and we'll see. Obviously, you know, history will judge whether he's successful or not, but it's probably a good thing to be having all of these conversations, and the fact that these countries are trying to pony up more money is a very positive thing.
Charlie Hurt, Charles Lane, Tom Rogan, thank you all. The situation at the Statue of Liberty is over. That protester is off. And when we come back, a sweet end to a NASCAR race.